black families' struggle, strength, and accomplishment in the face of systematic intimidation by the whites in the United States would have a far-reaching effect in answering this question. Did the U.S. government destroy black families? From the dubious separation of parents and children during the slave trade to the massive incarceration of African Americans under the mask of the war on drugs, we shall open these dark chapters of black history to provide you with the details of these complexities, while you will be the judge in the end. If you are new to this channel, welcome to Black Legacy Hub, where we uncover the untold stories of the blacks and explore the origin of their communities. We equally propagate stories that will allow blacks to access the right to freedom, equality, and peace devoid of any racial segregation. A one-time senator from New York in the United States, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, revealed in his report that the out-of-wedlock birth rate was 25% among black people in 1965. By 1991, 68% of black children were born outside of marriage, where marriage is defined with a government-issued license. In 2011, 72% of black babies were born to unmarried mothers, while the 2018 National Vital Statistics Report provides a figure of 69.4% for this condition. These statistics don't reflect the true intention of the blacks, nor do they justify that they were irresponsible. Watch this video till the end to uncover the motives behind them. Before founding the United States in 1776, slavery was already a major source of economic prosperity to the whites in their respective colonies, especially the southern plantation owners. The blacks through the slave trade were exposed to severe trauma, which was beyond the harsh working conditions. The families were torn apart, separated through trading or auctions, which usually resulted in them not seeing each other again. During this time, the whites saw blacks as less of humans and were better referred to as personal properties. The more slaveholders possessed, the more influential and wealthy they would be in the colonies. However, when the United States was founded and the Constitution was ratified, slavery was supposed to end after 20 years, but unfortunately, the institution was preserved by some selfish white South plantation owners, and the families of the African Americans were subjected to a multi-pronged onslaught which threatened their stability and unity in the harsh environment. The children of black women were separated from them right from birth. Do you know why? Wives of slaveholders who had lost their children to the malaria epidemic, while the children of the black slaves survived the parasite, courtesy of their breast milk, concluded that the breast milk of black slave women possessed immunity that could benefit infants. They resulted in the brutal separation of breastfeeding black mothers from their newborns to serve as wet nurses for their babies. So the newborns of the black women were fed with unhealthful cow milk and unclean water, while the white infants fed on the natural breast milk of the black slaves. Some newborns of black lost their lives due to improper care, while others were sold to other plantation owners to nurture as properties. These awful activities of the whites undermine the infants, parental bonds, and foundational destruction of black families in the U.S. If you're getting value from this video, show us your support through a quick click on the subscribe button and like this video. This singular act will keep you informed of our subsequent engaging content. If you have subscribed already, we haven't stopped appreciating your support and contributions. Thanks, always. Another critical factor that influenced the destruction of black families in the U.S. was the Jim Crow laws that were made to sustain white supremacy in the states of the former Confederacy. These laws expanded segregation into practically every aspect of black citizens' lives, from transportation to health care and many of the essentials for blacks' existence. The laws prevented black citizens from voting, being elected to office, serving juries, or participating as equals in the economic or social life of their area. These dehumanizing laws dismantled the blacks in the South, as some had to flee the region to the north, where the lives of blacks matter and were respected. Eventually, a civil rights movement emerged to protest violence and racial segregation, which brought about the passage of legislation that put an end to the Jim Crow era. However, the peace, unity, and safety of the black families were already destroyed. In the 1930s, the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, systematically worked to create racially segregated neighborhoods by refusing loans, insurance, and support to black communities. This was achieved through color coding of the neighborhoods. Color green was for best, while red for hazardous. This came to be known as redlining. Redlining supported negative stereotypes about African American neighborhoods and directly limited access to home ownership and business development in these areas. This resulted in the dismantling of the black families, who had to search for houses elsewhere. Also, the non-whites in the U.S. only got 2% of the $120 billion set aside for the new housing mortgages during this time. Some of the blacks who fought for the U.S. during World War II, despite the obvious racial segregation, were also denied the low-interest home loans promised through the GI Bill. These racial inequalities led to the physical and economic deterioration of these neighborhoods, since the blacks could not have access to quality housing and affordable mortgages. This also prevented black families from building generational wealth and limited their chances of upward mobility. Furthermore, the women's liberation after World War II influenced the destruction of black families by the United States government. Before this liberation, both black and white women worked, but at home with a meager pay. However, when black women joined the labor force in large numbers, the whites saw them as less threatening compared to black men, so they were more preferred for employment by the white employers. With this development, the status of breadwinners for their families was greatly threatened due to massive job losses of the black men. This also coincided with the transformation era, where technology reduced the need for manual labor to more technical, know-how labor. At one point, a good number of these men who had no required qualifications or experience were laid off, which resulted in crime and ended them in prison. The evidence of this systemic assault is glaringly clear in the staggering rates of fatherless homes, the overrepresentation of black individuals in the criminal justice system, and the persistent cycle of economic disadvantage that disproportionately affects black families. In the late 1970s, the mass incarceration witnessed in the United States was systematic, targeting particular races of the population. This act was disproportionately focused on African Americans, especially those with low levels of formal schooling. These young blacks were separated unjustly from their families and imprisoned with unspeakable physical and mental assaults. This also has damaging effects on the health of families, communities, employment, wages, political engagement, health, neighborhood stability, etc. No doubt, the tempting plucked prices of drugs had always motivated blacks to engage in the drug business compared to other employment opportunities in the United. The war drugs, which commenced in the late 20th century to combat drug abuse, was necessary, but its selective sentencing procedures and enforcement perpetuated a cycle of mass incarceration, fracturing families and tearing apart communities. Many scholars argue that this war on drugs was explicitly aimed at targeting and criminalizing black individuals, effectively cementing a narrative that black families were dangerous and unstable. The consequences continue to reverberate, as studies indicate that children with an incarcerated parent face numerous challenges in their development and prospects. In addition, the man-in-the-house rule was another embodiment that destroyed black families in the United States. In the late 1950s and early 60s, this law restricted two-parent households from receiving government benefits, which made many black fathers move out to be able to receive help to support their families. These rules were later abolished when the Supreme Court ruled against these exclusions in the case of King versus Smith, but already subjected the blacks to segregation and poverty. It is crucial for us to continue advocating for equity and social justice and dismantling systemic barriers. This is achievable by creating awareness, promoting understanding, and engaging in meaningful conversations. We can endeavor to build a society that uplifts and supports all families, regardless of their race or background. Finally, we have examined this topic together. You can share your opinion